What's going on, guys? Nathan here, back again with another top 5 underrated cards for Commander video for August of 2025. My name is Nathan. You're watching yet another Solid Productions YouTube video. If you enjoy this video, leave a like on it, subscribe if you want to see more, and if you want to support me on my channel, you can check out my Patreon linked below. Our first card here is called Trash the Town, and this is from Outlaws of Thunder Junction because it has the spree mechanic, which is basically just kicker. It will cost 1 mana, but then what we primarily care about is the last mode. We can pay an additional mana for a total of 2 mana for until end of turn. Target creature gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw 2 cards. Now, I really like this card in a deck that struggles to draw cards without having to jump through a bunch of hoops. A lot of the time, mono green leads into creature-based stompy draw. So things like Garruk's Uprising, or even something like a Tribute to the World Tree, which is going to care about the power of creatures entering. However, if you are empty-handed or you were looking for something to top deck to perhaps draw you into more interaction, then Trash the Town is basically an unconditional 2-mana draw 2 because it can be cast on any creature, not just yours. So for any opponent that is going to swing their creature into combat, and typically if there's like early game swing, turns 1 through 3, then people are generally not blocking because they want to keep the creatures, the mana dorks, their commander, etc., that have hit the board, and so a lot of just chip damage will fly around. So with Trash the Town, this is almost always an unconditional 2-mana draw 2, and I really like that because these are the secret ways to continue to hit your land drops in the mid and late game. I really love 2-mana draw 2s because they're always viable in your hand in both the early game and the late game. In the late game, if you need to dig for more removal or something, then you can just dig further into your deck, and I'm never really disappointed to see just a simple, efficient card draw spell in either the early, mid, or late game. So I think it's always good to run a couple of these sort of unconditional effects. I should caveat that, of course, the creature that you're targeting could be removed in response, but I don't really think that's going to happen very often because especially if you're casting this in the early or mid game, then there's probably not the game-ending threats being deployed quite then, and so I think you're pretty safe to cast this on something that's trying to get in for a little bit of chip damage. But like I said, it's good to run a couple of these draw effects that don't rely on having creatures in hand. I like to run Chart a Course or Winged Words in any deck with flyers because it will guarantee that you can always hit those land drops in the mid game. And honestly, I even like to run Harmonize sometimes in my low bracket 3, mid bracket 3 decks that aren't looking to completely optimize everything to the absolute maximum. So I really just like unconditional draw effects because they have a pretty high floor and a somewhat low ceiling. So if you're in like Gruul or perhaps mono green and you're looking for a low curve way to draw cards, give Trash the Town a look. Our next card here is called Behind the Scenes. This is a 3-mana enchantment that says creatures you control have Skulk, which means they can't be blocked by creatures with greater power, and we generally don't care about the activated ability because it's insanely expensive. But what I really like Behind the Scenes is in Toughness Matters decks. I think this is an absolute windmill slam because it basically means that you can swing and have your creatures be unblockable. So anything like the new Felithar, Precon, or the other Felithar, I believe is also a Toughness Matters, or any sort of, well, I guess Arcades is Bant, so that wouldn't be eligible for a black card, but any sort of Toughness Matters in the black color identity, or it's good in just any deck that wants to get into activate attack or combat triggers. So I like this in Infect decks or maybe Toxic decks because these decks tend to run a lot of really low to the ground creatures that are not always evasive, and typically you really want to just get in for a single hit in order to get that first poison counter so you can start proliferating. So Behind the Scenes, give it a look if you're in any sort of deck that maybe has a commander that also wants to get in for a combat damage trigger that has a low power. I will say as well, it is pretty good with instant speed overruns because essentially what you can do is you can cast the instant speed overrun in response to blockers being declared, of which your opponents will have no blockers if you have low power creatures, and then once your little 1/1s are have no blockers in their way, you can then respond to those blockers being declared and then hit that giant overrun effect like Revitalizing Wind or our next card that we're going to talk about, which is Mercadia's Downfall. That's right, that's a transition, folks. Mercadia's Downfall is a 3-mana instant in mono red that says attacking creatures get +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of non-basic lands defending player controls. So this is a very potent, very efficient instant speed overrun, and I personally would be pretty happy if this were to give my creatures +4/+0, but I honestly think that's the lower end of this card. If you're not in budget restrictions, then most of your opponents are going to have the vast majority of their lands be non-basic, at least in what I've found throughout the years. So if you're swinging or casting this, I should say, on turn 6, turn 7, I think you can probably expect that of your opponent's 6 lands, perhaps 5 of them are going to be non-basic, or if you're swinging for a giant alpha strike on turn 7 or turn 8, maybe 7 or 6 of their lands are going to be non-basic. And so I think that, honestly, the average case for Mercadia's Downfall is to basically be a +6/+0, which is incredibly potent and can definitely one-shot opponents for only 3 mana. Now, the downside is that it is single use, but like I said, you're basically casting a 3-mana target player loses the game, depending on how many non-basics that they have. So I think that this is an excellent overrun effect and great in any deck that you want to have instant speed overruns. Now, also, I will say that this doesn't give your attacking creatures evasion, so you'll want to have some sort of built-in trample or flying. So I think that this could go good in any sort of, I don't know, low to the ground. Maybe even like a Goblins deck would want this if you have some sort of trample enabler in the command zone. But give Mercadia's Downfall a look if you're looking for a very efficient overrun effect. Our next card here is not an overrun, but it is a lure effect. This is called Roar of Challenge. It's a 3-mana sorcery. All creatures able to block target creature this turn do so, and it has Ferocious. That creature gains indestructible until end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. So this is a multi-target removal spell in mono green, and I think you have to be in Big Stompy to probably want this deck. You really want to trigger that Ferocious clause, but I think that this is a windmill slam into Big Stompy decks in mono green. Lure effects are excellent at removing blockers because they can really take out those creatures that don't want to get into combat, basically value engines that just want to sit on the battlefield and accrue value. So this takes advantage of the fact that your opponents will never really attack with those creatures or do anything because they'll be sitting there untapped and they'll be forced to block. So this has a high ceiling in that it can basically clear out a board full of blockers. On the flip side, this has a low floor because given that this is sorcery speed, you cast this and it has to target a creature, and if that creature is removed before getting the indestructible, before allowing the Roar of Challenge to actually resolve, then this is a 3-mana do nothing. So this could be a low floor card, but the ceiling is that you get to basically destroy your opponent's entire board if this is cast on something like an insane 12/12 Galta, or any sort of like big 8/8 body that wants to be getting in for attacks anyway. You can remove several creatures at once. So I sort of look at this as a ceiling, as like a 3-mana destroy 4 creatures or 3-mana destroy 3 creatures, provided that you have, you're swinging at the opponent with the value engine on board. So that's my case for Roar of Challenge. I definitely want to experiment with this deck more. I really like lure effects overall, and I find that this is one of the more efficiently costed lure effects in the Commander format. Our final card here is Flame of Anor. This is a 3-mana instant. Choose one if you control a wizard. As you cast a spell, you may choose 2 instead. Target player draws 2 cards, destroy target artifact, or Flame of Anor deals 5 damage to target creature. So this is always a 3-for-1 in Wizard Tribal or any deck with a commander that happens to have the wizard creature type, because you are almost always going to want to draw 2 cards and deal 5 damage to a target creature, depending on what is needed to get off the board. If somebody has like a coat of arms on the battlefield, then you obviously want to destroy that. That's a bad example, because if you're in Wizard Tribal, you're benefiting from a coat of arms. But a point being here is that it is very rare in Magic to see draw cards, remove target thing off of the board, and Flame of Anor is at instant speed. So this is just sort of an anomaly in terms of the efficiency that it provides, where you're able to both draw cards and remove permanent opponents off of the board. The worst case scenario is that if you don't control a wizard, you can still do an instant speed divination. 3-minute instant speed to destroy target artifact or deal 5 damage to target creature is pretty scuffed in my opinion, but a 3-mana instant speed divination is not the absolute worst thing in the world. I still find it is somewhat useful if you need to draw into more gas or more removal. So it's still useful even at its lowest floor case, and the ceiling for this card is that it's basically a 3-for-1 because you get to draw 2 and remove something from your opponent's board, provided that it has toughness 5 or less, which I find most utility creatures and creatures you actually want off of the board fall into that category. So Flame of Anor, an absolute windmill slam into Wizard Tribal, but if you happen to have a wizard as your creature type on your commander, give Flame of Anor a look if you're in Izzet colors as well. I feel like this is one of those cards that just sort of slipped past the goalie here because Lord of the Rings came out so long ago. This card has been a little bit forgotten, but just an incredibly good instant. That was our last card, but I actually have a bonus honorable mention I wanted to discuss with you all, and I would love to hear your opinion on this card in the comments below because I myself am very confused about whether this card is good or bad. This is called Earnest Fellowship. It is a 2-minute enchantment, 1 and a white. Each creature has protection from its colors. So my question is, where do you run this card? This is a game warping effect once it hits the battlefield because, of course, protection basically means your creatures can't be blocked by, targeted by, or dealt damage by that condition or that color that it's being protected from. So my initial impression was, well, maybe you want to run this in a multicolored matters for creatures that want to get in for combat damage. So something like Akalia would maybe want this because she can get through and be able to actually survive that combat to get her attack trigger. But there also might be a commander like Jared Carthalion that might want this because it makes a little creature tokens that are all colors, or something like the Wandering Minstrel. There's also like Niv Mizzet Reborn, which cares about sort of guild-based cards, and even maybe a little bit more niche, but General Ferrous Rockerick would only really give protection against like Boros colors, which is good for white, but I don't know whether red is technically good to protect from. So you could run this in like a multicolored matters deck, or you could also run this in any commander that basically is multicolored that wants to stick around and get in for combat damage, or just generally doesn't want to be targeted by anything. So I'm thinking like Marisi is sort of a value engine you want to keep around a lot that tends to get targeted. The 5-color Omnath also is just a giant value engine that's also 5 colors that would be good. Or you could look at this for decks that want to change colors of things. So like the only one that comes to mind really is like a white, an 8.5 tails, which is mono white, but it can change colors of spells to other colors. Or alternatively, I was thinking like, would this even go in like a Selesnya deck or like a Sithis Enchantress deck? With an Enchantress deck, it would be at least 2 mana draw a card, bare minimum. But I mean, every enchantment in an Enchantress deck is going to draw you a card. So do you run this to protect against like green and white? So I can't really figure out whether this card is good or not, but I wanted to put it at the end here as an honorable mention to see what you guys think of Earnest Fellowship and whether you would run it in a deck, or maybe where would you find a home for this card. I just think it's a very interesting effect, and I'm curious to experiment with this card. But that is going to wrap up my top 5 underrated cards for August of 2025. If you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like on it, and I will be back in a couple of months to make another one of these top 5 videos. I have an ongoing notepad in my phone that as I discover these niche cards, I like to make a note of them so that I can bring them to you all to get your opinions and show you cool tech. So that's the video, guys. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll see you all in the next one.